My name is Sachin Pavithran. I am the executive director for the United States Access Board, which is a federal agency based in the United States under the White House. So what we do is we write the technical standards on accessibility for the built environment, transportation, and ICT. So we're independent agency that writes regulations to ensure accessibility in the United States.
Sachin, welcome to Double Tap. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us about what you're talking about, because of course I imagine there's plenty to talk about when it comes to accessibility standards and implementing all those standards. Why are you talking about it at Inclusive Africa?
So I was, being a blind person who's always been interested in accessibility for personal reasons, but also professionally, it's always good to learn what's happening outside the space that I work with on a daily basis. So not to just share the knowledge I've gained, but also learn from others so we can share our ideas and kind of bridge the gap, because accessibility is a global issue, not a national issue. So I've been here for a couple of days, learning a lot. I had the opportunity to keynote on Tuesday, and then networking with a lot of people.
I mean, in your role, what is it you're overseeing? Are you checking on accessibility standards? Are you writing those standards in the U.S. government? What is your role?
So in my role, I'm the head of the agency. So the agency writes the technical standards. So we are the agency that prescribe what and define what the accessibility should look like in the different environments. And we do not do the implementation and enforcement. Other agencies with the authority does the enforcement and implementation. So we are more of the technical experts when it comes to accessibility.
So are you finding you're taking more away, or are you bringing to Inclusive Africa? What's your experience been so far?
It's hard to tell how much of each. I think it's both. I'm definitely learning how, what are the different ways people are managing accessibility with not the similar way of not having the standards in place, not having, all the legislation that we have the privilege in the U.S. to have. So how are disabled people, how are blind people functioning with what they have? And it's always fascinating to see, people are figuring it out, even with the bare minimum what they have, and doing things in a very remarkable way. So I'm learning those tricks that people have figured out, especially the blind population here in Nairobi. I was just talking to an individual right before I came up here on how he just climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, which is something I'm planning on doing in a few months. And so learning from him, what did he do? So those kind of little tips and tricks.
Yeah. Is everyone climbing Mount Kilimanjaro? I'm feeling left out here.
We're never going to do that, Sean.
No, we're not. No.
But, I think we have to kind of talk about the realities of today's world, right, Sachin? I mean, we're in a very difficult situation, especially for you in the US, when it comes to, what is going on politically. I don't know how much you can speak to this, but, there is a reality here that, there are a lot of disabled people who are concerned about where things are going, where things are headed. And accessibility standards is one of those areas where, people are concerned that, as a rush seems to be to get out of the idea of thinking of DEI, and let's include the A for accessibility in that, because a lot of people forget to do that. In a rush to kind of move away from DEIA, there's a risk to the standards, the kind of work you're doing.
Yeah, so, being someone who works right under the White House, I got to be careful what I say here. So, is there a concern? Yes, there's always a concern when new administration comes into office. We do not know what the intention, what the desire is going to be. So we're working through, the current administration, what their scope is on different areas. Now, there are challenges with different ideologies coming in. What we're trying to do, at least myself in my position that I hold and the influence that I have, trying to separate the accessibility piece as much as I can, but also helping to them to understand the return on investment on having people with disabilities being employed. What does that mean? Because there's a big conversation about cutting waste and being more efficient. So my idea in the conversation is keeping accessibility standards and promoting accessibility standards actually creates more efficiency. So you do not have to spend the kind of dollars for unemployment and the services that are there for people with disabilities needs to be there. But if you remove those expenses are just going to keep going up. So kind of making an argument, helping them understand the benefit, but also helping them understand this is not a political issue. This is a win-win for no matter what political party you have, no matter what your philosophy might be. But this is a non-controversial issue that really helps people in the longer run, whether you are disabled today or you may be disabled in the future.
I mean, I suppose I'm wondering, because we hear so much noise. I mean, if you sat and watched 24-hour news, you would think the world was ending tomorrow, right?
Exactly.
So, I wonder how much of what we're hearing, how much of the fear that is stoked online, that people are feeling, genuinely feeling, is actually based on anything other than hyperbole. Is it real? I mean, what is actually going on? I mean, do you feel there's an attack on disabled people in the US, or do you feel that that is a narrative rather than reality?
There are concerns, if you step away from the accessibility standards, and when you start talking more about healthcare, one of the big conversations right now in the US, you have what they call the Medicaid, Medicare options in healthcare, which provides a lot of funding for people with disabilities, especially those who do not have employment, those who have conditions that require some extra coverage when it comes to healthcare. There are concerns where those might be stripped away. So nothing's happened yet, but there are red flags because of some of the narrative that are being talked in Congress, some of the push for change that are coming from some of the groups that are trying to do what they think is best. So the fear is accurate, and I think people should be concerned, but people also should not just sit back and not do anything about it. They need to be, advocating, talking to their lawmakers and making sure the community that they govern has needs, and this is not something they can just look the other way.
Yeah, as so many people we've spoken to here, it's all about people being heard and getting their voice out there. You need to be heard to make a difference. Absolutely. Talking of making a difference, standards, and you help set standards. So where are we at with standards? When is every website going to be accessible for me? Can you fix that?
How's that going, Sachin?
I wish I could just do it with a flick of my finger, but unfortunately, I feel like we've come a long ways, but we still got a long ways to go, especially in the private sector. Now, I know in the European Union, at least from the US, we're eagerly waiting what's going to happen with the European Accessibility Act, that coming into play here in a few weeks. How all the implementation is going to look, what it's going to look like. So there's a lot of frustration. Myself being a blind person, obviously I'm frustrated with the inaccessible content that I keep running into, not just in my personal life, but also in my professional life, in my employment, to do some of the tasks that you would think is basic tasks. So when will it get done? I don't know. I wish it was sooner than later, but it's a work in progress. But I hope we don't have to keep dealing with this ongoing.
Can we talk a little bit about the European Accessibility Act and what your understanding is of what that will do? Because obviously it's an act which applies to Europe, but of course it has worldwide implications. I mean, we saw this for consumers. We saw this when Apple were forced to put the USB-C port onto their iPhones because,
Yeah.
essentially they wouldn't be able to sell them into Europe otherwise. That was changed, although Apple did in fact sell it as a feature of the new iPhone, which I always thought was quite funny. But, nothing to do with regulation or rules. But, obviously this will have a huge impact. What are you, because you must be really into this, you must be really digging into this to kind of understand how it will impact your work.
Yeah. With us, we don't have the level that the EAA is going to do in the private sector. That's what we are more interested to see, how the private sector is going to react and what are they going to do to bring it up to speed. Because we're very behind when it comes to some of the accessibility things that the private sector should have been on the same level as the public sector. I feel like we do fairly well in the federal government, the city and state, the local level. But when it comes to private sector, we have a long ways to go. So that's the piece that we're really watching. What is the private sector going to do? Are they going to comply, or are they going to, try to find a loophole? And also you see how the standards really, how that really has the impact of it.
I remember sitting down with someone at an event in the UK called TechShare Pro a few years ago, Malin Rigg. She was from Norway, and she told me about how in her government, one thing that they had done was bring in some pretty severe enforcement rules, which meant
I just
that
did
companies...
a panel with her.
Well, there you go, right? You'll know the story, of course, of the
Yeah.
essentially, was it 15,000 euros a day or something was the fine if, companies, and this was private sector, it wasn't public sector,
Yeah.
if they did not get their websites sorted out in time, they would have a per day fine. And, we had a discussion at the time about how far you go with the carrot versus the stick approach in order to get companies to comply. Where do you fall on this issue?
I think it's a great approach. I just don't think in the US, it'll never work. You have, you got plenty of lobbyists that is going to shoot that down really fast. It's great that it's worked in Norway, and I think it probably works in that community, that society. Every country is going to be very different. I'm for it if we can make it happen. I just know it will not happen in the US.
That's interesting.
That's a shame. That's a shame, because it's all about reinforcing legislation, isn't it? It's giving those enforcements teeth. And if it's simpler cases, well, we know they won't do it because of lobbyists. That's a real shame.
It is. It is, and it's unfortunate, but
it's the reality.
That is the reality we live in, and we need to find other ways to have more of enforcement. Because the U.S. model is more based on the legal framework, lawsuits after lawsuits, which is an expensive and a long, drawn-out framework.
Yeah, I mean, what is the solution then? Because the other option is, I guess, unless there's a third option I'm unaware of, that you go to a company and you say, look, it's the right thing to do. And you appeal to the heart. You appeal to the fact that, the dollar of a disabled person is worth the same as someone who's non-disabled. Is that the other way to do it?
I think that needs to go hand in hand. We work pretty closely with industry to get a buy-in, having the culture shift within their organization. Why inclusive access, all those topics are very important in their business, and also making the case, like you just said, that people with disabilities do have disposable income. You're losing that profit margin when you don't include our community in your business portfolio.
I mean, do you feel, and I know it's difficult to speak on this, but do you feel it is a scary time for disabled people at the moment? You've said the fear is real. Is it a scary time? It's
probably a little more scary right now because there's a lot going on, but it's not any different than it has been in the past. Now there's too much going on, so that I think it probably increases the fear because we don't know where to focus. But some of the issues are not new issues. These issues have been around for a while now. We just haven't solved it. We just tacked on more issues on top of the existing stuff right now.
Which is life in general these days, isn't it?
Yeah,
And that's
yeah.
it's life for everybody. Sachin, it's been wonderful talking to you. Thank you so much for the work you do, and come back again. We'd love to talk to you again.
Well, thank you. Thanks for the work that you guys are doing.
Thanks so much.